You're learning to balance both, to act without rushing, to pause without stalling, to choose without second guessing. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When creation energy is this strong, the environment starts responding before you feel ready. Opportunities appear that test your clarity. Distractions present themselves as rewards. Old patterns knock politely. They've changed. That's not sabotage. That's examination. Examinations aren't meant to trick you. They reveal what you've actually internalized versus what you just intellectually understood. And right now, your responses matter more than your intentions. So if things feel a little stripped down, a little quieter, a little more focused than usual, that's not a warning sign. That's preparation. Something is consolidating. Something is organizing itself around the version of you that's emerging instead of the one that was convenient to keep around. And once that consolidation completes, once focus locks in fully, the pace changes again. The responsiveness increases, the feedback loop tightens, and that's when creation stops feeling abstract and starts feeling undeniable. This is the moment people usually misinterpret. They assume the intensity means they should rush, that they should hurry up and make something happen before the window closes. That instinct is understandable. It's also the fastest way to misfire. High creation energy doesn't reward speed, it rewards accuracy. It responds to precision, not panic. The reason you're being asked to be careful right now is not because danger is approaching, but because your influence has increased. When influence increases, mistakes carry more weight. Not dramatic mistakes, subtle ones. The kind that don't look like errors until you're living inside their consequences. You may notice that what you say casually
Bisilang.
seems to land harder than before. Words stick, opinions echo. Often comments take on lives of their own. That's not coincidence. That's leverage showing itself. Your presence is carrying more signal than noise, which means everything you put out has more traction. This is not the time to speak carelessly or entertain thoughts just because they're familiar. Familiarity does not equal truth, and right now, truth organizes reality faster than it ever could. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. You're becoming more aware of your internal timing. When to move, when to pause, when to wait without stagnating. That sense doesn't come from logic. It comes from alignment between thought, emotion, and instinct. When those three stop fighting each other, decisions become cleaner. You don't need elaborate justifications. You don't need consensus. You feel the click when something is right, and the drag when it isn't. This is why things are about to get super interesting. Not because chaos is coming, but because clarity is. And clarity has a way of rearranging everything that relied on confusion to survive. Relationships built on imbalance feel awkward. Goals built on compensation feel hollow. Habits built on avoidance feel exhausting. None of this is punishment. It's exposure. And exposure is uncomfortable only if you insist on holding on to feelings outgrown. You might feel moments of sudden certainty, followed by moments of doubt. That oscillation is normal. It's not regression, it's calibration. Think of it as your internal compass adjusting to a stronger magnetic field. The needle wobbles before it settles. If you try to force it, you slow the process. If you observe it, it stabilizes faster. Right now, observation is power. Watching your reactions, watching what triggers urgency, watching what creates calm. Those observations are not passive, they're active data collection. Data, when interpreted honestly, prevents unnecessary detours. You don't need to fix everything. You need to notice everything that consistently pulls you off center. This is also where dark humor sneaks in. Whether you like it or not, you start seeing the absurdity of old patterns. How much effort went into maintaining things that never really worked. How serious you were about problems that evaporate the moment you stop treating them. You might catch yourself laughing internally at situations that once felt heavy. That's not dismissal, that's detachment. And detachment frees energy without requiring bitterness. Be careful not to confuse detachment with indifference. Indifference numbs, detachment clarifies. You still care, you just don't cling. You don't chase outcomes to feel complete. You don't grip scenarios to feel safe. You let things reveal what they are without forcing them to become what you hoped. That shift alone changes everything. As this intensity continues, you'll notice that creation becomes less about imagining and more about selecting. Options appear, but not all of them deserve attention. Some are distractions dressed up as opportunities. Some are tests disguised as rewards. The difference is in how they feel over time. Distractions excite quickly and drain quickly. Aligned paths may feel understated at first, but they build momentum without friction. This is where patience becomes a strategic advantage, not passive waiting, active restraint, choosing not to react to every impulse, choosing not to chase every possibility, choosing to let things develop one layer deeper before engaging. Restraint right now is not limitation, it's direction. You may also feel a growing intolerance for self deception. Small lies you tell yourself to stay comfortable start to feel abrasive. You can't unknow what you know anymore. And that's a good thing, even when it's inconvenient. Knowledge creates responsibility, but it also creates freedom. Freedom from cycles that only persist because they're never questioned. This is the phase where you realize that creation isn't about adding more to your life. It's about subtracting what doesn't belong. So what does belong has room to expand. Expansion without space just creates pressure. Space without expansion creates stagnation. Right now, both are happening in sequence. Clearing, then building, quietly, efficiently. Be mindful of how you frame your experiences during this period. The stories you tell yourself are blueprints. If you frame challenges as confirmation that something is wrong, you reinforce resistance. If you frame them as adjustments, you cooperate with refinement. Language matters more than usual because language shapes interpretation, and interpretation directs energy. You might notice that your tolerance for chaos drops. Not external chaos necessarily, but internal disorganization, scattered thoughts, emotional clutter, unfinished loops. These start demanding closure. You feel an urge to resolve, not because you're impatient, but because unresolved energy feels heavier now. Resolution frees capacity. Capacity allows creation to flow without obstruction. This is also why boundaries feel easier to enforce, not because you've become harder, but because you've become clearer. Clear boundaries don't require aggression. They're communicated through consistency, through what you respond to and what you don't, through where you place your attention and where you withdraw it. Attention is endorsement right now. Use it deliberately. You may find that people project more onto you during this phase. Their expectations, their assumptions, their fears. That's not your responsibility to manage. Projection intensifies when someone senses coherence they don't yet have. Stay grounded. Don't absorb what isn't yours. Reflection is synchronicities may feel less like surprises and more like confirmations. Things line up not because you asked for them explicitly, but because your internal state is finally compatible with them. Compatibility is underrated. It's not about desire, it's about readiness. And readiness isn't something you declare, it's something demonstrated through behavior. This is where care becomes essential. Care in what you agree to, care in what you tolerate, care in what you rehearse mentally, care in what you dismiss. Every choice is a vote, not just for outcomes, but for identity. Who you are becoming is being reinforced through repetition right now, faster than usual. You might feel tempted to explain this process to others, to justify your shifts, to narrate your evolution. Resist that urge. Explanation dissipates energy. Integration concentrates it. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency communicate. The people who need explanations are rarely the ones who understand them anyway. As this phase unfolds, you'll notice that some desires sharpen while others dissolve. That's discernment refining itself. Desire without clarity creates chaos. Clarity without desire creates stagnation. You're learning to hold both without forcing either. That balance is rare, and it's the reason things are about to get interesting in ways you can't fully predict yet. There will be moments where you feel ahead of yourself, moments where you wonder if you're imagining the acceleration. Those moments pass quickly once results begin to surface. Not necessarily dramatic results, subtle shifts, easier movement, cleaner decisions, fewer internal debates. Those are the real indicators that creation is responding. Be careful with impatience. Impatience doesn't speed things up. It distorts perception. It makes you overlook incremental progress because it doesn't match imagined timelines. Timelines are flexible right now. Direction is not. Stay oriented toward what feels coherent, not what feels urgent. You may also notice an increase in personal accountability. Faster when you slip into old habits. You correct course sooner. That's not self-criticism, that's self-respect. Respect for your own capacity to influence outcomes. Respect for the energy moving through you. As creation becomes undeniable, you'll realize that power doesn't feel like domination. It feels like responsibility without burden, choice without confusion, movement without force. That's the paradox most people miss. Real influence is quiet because it doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in results. This is why the warning matters. Be careful. Not because something bad is looming, but because something powerful is active. Power amplifies whatever it touches. Treated casually, it creates mess. Treated deliberately, it creates momentum that feels almost unfair in its efficiency. You're meant to isolate during this phase, but you are meant to be selective. Connection that supports clarity accelerates growth. Connection that feeds confusion drains it. Choose accordingly. You don't need to cut ties dramatically. Distance often establishes itself naturally when alignment shifts. As you move forward, trust the signals you're receiving from your own experience. The sense of rightness, the subtle resistance, the quiet pull. Those signals are accurate right now. Doubting them out of habit only delays what's already organizing itself. This period won't last forever. The intensity will stabilize. The sensitivity will ease. But what you establish now sets the tone for what follows. This is a foundation phase disguised as a quiet stretch. Miss it, and you recreate old patterns at higher volume. Use it, and you step into a level of coherence that makes progress feel almost effortless. So yes, be careful, be aware, be precise, because the energy of creation is very intense right now. Not loud, not chaotic. Intense in the way a focused beam is intense. And once you align with it fully, once you stop feeding what drains you and start cooperating with what stabilizes you, things don't just change. They rearrange themselves around who you've become. And that's when you realize the warning was never about fear. It was about readiness. Welcome back, you unsupervised miracle. You beautiful, terrifying walking audit of everybody else's standards. Let's make one thing very clear from the start. Your city has a problem, and the problem is you. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something too right in a place that built its comfort on overlooking people like you. There's a sentence floating through back alleys, group chats, barbershops, DM threads, parking lots after midnight. Who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? And every time someone says it, the room goes just a little heavier. Because they all know they saw you. They just didn't recognize what they were looking at. Picture this for a second. A circle of people outside a corner store acting like they're just passing time. One of them drops your name, casual. Another one says, "Nah, for real. How did we miss that?" And then it clicks. You weren't the one who was invisible. They were the ones who were blind. While they were busy hyping up loud mediocrity, you were at a level that didn't match the surroundings. No theatrics, no attention campaigns, no begging to be chosen. Just consistency. Just precision. Just a kind of discipline that makes you exposed when they finally notice. You were never meant to be the neighborhood's feel-good story. You weren't built to be the person they clap for when it's convenient and forget when it's not. You carry the kind of wiring that makes people rethink their own potential. And that's uncomfortable. It's easier to pretend you're doing well than to admit you're operating on a level most of them never had the courage to aim at. So for the longest time, they tried to file you away in their mind as cool, but nothing crazy. Just another face, just another name, just another person from around here. Then you started making moves that couldn't be brushed off. Someone watched you solve a problem in minutes that had them stuck for weeks. Someone else clocked how you handled disrespect with a calm that didn't look like weakness. It looked like control. Another person saw you show up, not once, not twice, but over and over, doing what you said you'd do without needing anyone to praise you for it. These weren't big, flashy moments. These were quiet receipts. At first, they treated it like coincidence. Then the coincidences started forming a pattern. And that pattern has a name. And it keeps coming up even when you're not there. Word around town is you're the one who doesn't fold, the one who doesn't panic, the one who doesn't move like the environment is all there is. You don't cling to places that refuse to grow. You don't chase validation from people who only know how to love you if you stay small. You're not trying to impress a crowd that confuses confidence with arrogance because they've never seen self-respect at full volume. You move like someone who's already had the conversation with themselves. No one's coming to save you. You either build it or you stay bitter. And you chose building. That's what's causing all this noise. Your city is used to crowning the same personalities over and over again. Same families, same last names, same social circles, same recycled talent. Everyone pretends is legendary because they grew up around it. Then you show up and start outperforming entire friend groups without asking for a seat at their table. You didn't wait to be handed a title. You became undeniable. That's different. That's threatening. Because if you can rise without their cosigns, What does that say about how inflated their own reputation really is? Here's the part nobody wants to admit out loud. A lot of people remember having front row access to you. They remember sitting next to you in class, standing beside you at work, sharing space with you at parties, watching you stay to yourself while everyone else chased attention. They remember the calm way you paid attention to detail. They remember how you asked real questions while others just talked to hear their own voices. They remember offering you bare minimum energy while you showed up with integrity. And now, watching you grow, they have to live with the fact that they were that close to greatness and treated it like background noise. Your rise is not just an upgrade, it's an indictment. Every step you take forward exposes the people who never believed in you. Not because you needed them, but because they needed the illusion that they can always spot value when it walks into the room. They couldn't. They didn't. You proved it. And that stings. So now the conversations sound different. Yo, didn't you used to know them? Didn't they ask you for help once? Didn't they invite you to that project and you said no? Suddenly, everyone who brushed you off is on trial in the court of public opinion because the footage is starting to replay in their own heads. And you're not even pressing charges. You're too busy moving. You're not calling people out. You're not writing paragraphs about how they doubted you. You're not begging the city to catch up. You're just walking in a direction that doesn't require their permission. That's what makes this so uncomfortable for them. You're not a hometown hero begging for recognition. You're a force that outgrew the local script before anybody realized you'd memorized it. You understand the rules. You just refuse to live under them. You're respectful, but you're not obedient. You're grounded, but you're not stuck. Right now, there are people who feel nervous whenever your name comes up because they remember how casually they dismissed you. They're trying to rewrite history in real time. I always knew they were different, they say, when in reality they rolled their eyes. They doubted. They downplayed. They're scrambling to get back in your orbit without looking like they're crawling. They'll send you half-hearted messages, old photos, throwback memories, hoping you don't remember the way they used to overlook you when it mattered. The truth is, you don't even hate them. You've just recalibrated your access list. Understand something important. You didn't get lucky. You got disciplined. You didn't magically become this version of yourself. You sharpened in the dark while everyone else was busy being seen. You stayed in on nights where everyone else needed a crowd to feel alive. You put energy into learning, building, healing, and recalibrating when nobody was checking up on you. You didn't wait for an audience to develop a work ethic. That's why this new attention feels late to you. Because it is. You've been this person. The city is just late to its own realization. And now, people are starting to use you as a reference point. New names enter the conversation, and someone says, yeah, they're good, but they're not on that level. Your existence has quietly become a measuring stick. People who have never spoken to you directly are adjusting their standards because of you. Some are leveling up because you make coasting look embarrassing. Some are pulling back because they feel exposed standing next to someone who actually follows through. Either way, you changed the temperature without announcing it. That's real influence. But this goes deeper than just reputation. There are people who don't even like you who still study you. They won't admit it, but they watch how you move. They pay attention to what you say yes to, and more importantly, what you refuse. They notice that you don't chase chaotic spaces just to feel included. You don't gossip for sport. You don't waste your focus on petty rounds of who said what. You move like someone who is aware that every decision is low-key, shaping a future version of you that you're going to have to live with. That mindset alone separates you from a lot of the city. You also carry a kind of emotional composure they don't have language for yet. People have thrown shade, rumors, little digs, subtle exclusion. You didn't launch a campaign to clear your name. You watched. You filed it away. You let their behavior expose what their words were trying to cover. And then, instead of spiraling, you went back to building. That's the part that keeps them up at night. They know they tested your boundaries, and you never lost focus. Because on some level, they were hoping you'd break character. They wanted proof that you're just like everybody else under pressure. They didn't get it. They're only now starting to grasp that what they mistook for distance was actually self-respect. You weren't acting brand new. You were refusing to let people with no vision be close enough to steer yours. You kept your circle small because you understand that proximity is influence, and you're not letting just anyone have a say in your future. That's not arrogance. That's risk management with a face. But here's where it gets interesting. The more your name travels, the less control anybody has over how far this goes. You're not just talented from this city anymore. You're starting to feel like the one that city will eventually claim when you're too far gone for them to control. You know how it goes. Cities love saying they're one of ours after they ignored you for years. They'll swear they always believed. They'll dig up old photos, old stories, old I knew them when lines just to feel connected to something they never actually supported when it counted. That's the irony. They only realize you were the hometown treasure once the world starts bidding. That's why the streets are loud again. Different tone this time, though. This isn't the early noise where people argue over gossip, where everyone's searching for a flaw they can exaggerate. This is the tense kind of talk that happens when reality is already voted, and everybody realizes they backed the wrong candidates for years. Conversations have shifted from, yeah, they're cool, to, no, seriously, who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? And nobody wants to answer that question because everybody knows they played a part in it. You had teachers who wrote you off as smart but distracted, when in reality you were pushed out of your mind because the material was moving at half speed into your brain. You had supervisors who labeled you too intense when you were the only one who cared when things were done properly. You had friends who called you extra because you refused to normalize half effort. You had family who said, don't aim too high, while secretly feeling threatened that you were even considering it. All those people are walking around now acting surprised, like they didn't spend years trying to sand down your edges because your sharpness made them feel unprepared. Now those same streets that tried to domesticate you are treating you like an unsolved case file. People replay old interactions with you in their mind and spot things they should have seen then. The way you observed, the way you listened instead of jumping into every conversation, the way you didn't need to be in every photo to feel real, the way you remembered details other people casually dropped and brought those details back months later when they were actually useful. Back then, they misread all of that as weird or quiet or standoffish. Now they're starting to realize those were early indicators of someone operating on a different calibration. So the conversations sound like this now. Wait, didn't you used to work with them? Didn't they sit in our class? Were they at that party? Everyone is trying to locate themselves in your story, not because they supported you, but because they're trying to see if they accidentally ended up on the wrong
Păi
side of
ține
history. Nobody wants to be the one who says, yeah, they asked for help once and I shrugged it off. Nobody wants to admit, I saw their work and thought it was too much. No one wants to confess they watched you try and decided you were doing the most just because they were committed to doing the least. This is the part that stings their pride the most. You didn't blow up because the city finally rallied behind you. You advanced despite it. You figured things out alone, one small move at a time, while people you cared about were busy assuming you'd always be there, unchanged, available, conveniently underutilized. You were learning skills, building connections, studying patterns, growing in directions no one thought to ask about. They thought you were stuck in the same loop as you were quietly constructed, tracked, and now that track is visible. Maybe it's not full scale yet, but it's visible enough for people to recognize there's momentum they can't deny anymore. A podcast mention here, a repost from someone outside the city, a random clip catching traction with strangers, a client, an opportunity, an invite from a place you have no physical ties to. Little fragments of proof that your work exists beyond local politics. The streets hear this and panic in subtle ways. They won't say it out loud, but the message is clear. If they leave and take that energy with them, we can never claim we nurtured it. So they start rewriting the narrative in real time. People who barely spoke to you come out of nowhere with proud of you. Old classmates suddenly remember you were always different. People who once told you to be realistic are now telling others they always knew you were going to go far. They're posting you with captions that sound supportive, but secretly read like insurance policies. Look, I was there. I knew them. It's less about you and more about them trying not to look completely out of touch when the world starts echoing what they ignored first. Here's the funny part. The same folks who called you too much now complain that the city doesn't support real talent, as if they weren't the ones who walked past you when it mattered, as if they didn't have front row seats and choose the bathroom break every time you stepped on the stage, spoke up, dropped work, and presented ideas. They act like your greatness hid from them. It didn't. It stood right in front of them, and they dismissed it because it didn't come packaged in a familiar face, a family name, or a desperate need for approval. You weren't loud enough for their taste because you weren't begging. You weren't messy enough to be entertaining. You weren't dependent enough to be controllable. You didn't flirt with every opportunity. You evaluated. You didn't attach yourself to every group. You observed. You didn't chase every crowd. You watched them burn themselves out while you went home and refined. That restraint they once mocked has now become the very thing that makes you stand out. Your brand isn't built on chaos. It's built on clarity. And clarity is dangerous out here, because once people see you for who you actually are, they start to question all the people they thought were impressive before. The rapper with no growth in 5 years. The boss, who only looks successful on social media. The leader, who can't make a decision without validation. The friend who's always on the brink of something big, but never actually finishes anything. Once you enter the conversation, all of that looks lighter. You don't even have to speak on it. Your consistency drags the comparison into the open. That's why this energy feels different. Word around town is not just that you're talented. It's that you're the one they slept on. The one the city wasn't prepared for. The one whose work ethic doesn't match their bare minimum expectations. You are not just a local success story waiting to happen. You are a walking reminder that they misjudged their own environment. You're proof that they had gold and treated it like scrap metal. But pay attention to the shifts in behavior now. Watch how people approach you. Some will come with exaggerated support, over-the-top praise, trying to speedrun from doubted you to always believed. They'll share your things with captions that sound like they've been chairing your fan club from day one. Meanwhile, you remember every dismissive comment they made when there was nothing in it for them. You don't have to call them out. You just have to remember that energy is data. Others won't approach at all. They'll keep your name tastefully out of their mouth, not because they don't see your rise, but because admitting it would require them to confront how wrong they were about you. They'd rather behave like your growth is exaggerated than admit they misread you completely. They'll downplay your progress. It's just online stuff. It's just a trend. It's just a phase. That's just their ego negotiating with reality, trying not to feel small standing beside something they no longer have control over. Then there's the opportunist group. They see your trajectory and don't feel guilt. They feel possibility. They haven't supported you. They don't understand you. They don't respect the process, but they respect proximity to power. So they show up with ideas, collaborations, mutual benefit. They want access to your grind without ever having survived the nights you cried, questioned everything, nearly gave up, and still got up the next day and showed up. They want the glow without the grit. You're not obligated to be bitter or petty. That's the beauty of where you're heading. Your level of greatness gives you options in how you respond. You can forgive without re-inviting. You can acknowledge without reattaching. You can be polite without reopening doors that you closed for your own peace. They're not ready for that version of you, the one who has receipts, compassion, and boundaries. You're no longer starving for emotional crumbs, so their late applause hits different. You hear it. You just don't build around it. Meanwhile, the quiet observers, the ones who always felt something about you but maybe didn't have the courage to say it out loud, are starting to step forward. These are the ones who never mocked your intensity. They might not have understood you fully, but they didn't insult what they couldn't decode. They didn't try to shrink you. They just watched, waited, gave respectful distance. Those people, when they say they're proud, it lands. It feels clean. No performance. No retroactive loyalty. Just acknowledgement. Your city, whether it wants to admit it or not, is going through a psychological order because of you. Every person who crossed paths with you is being forced to remember how they handled you the first time. Did they water you, ignore you, try to drain you, try to own you, try to copy you? You are their case study now. Their reaction to your early stages says more about them than it did about you. And here's where the dark humor kicks in. The very people who once told you, "Don't get your hopes up," are now telling younger kids to watch what you're doing. You became the cautionary tale, but not in the way they expected. You're not what happens when you dream too big. You're what happens when you actually follow through. You're the example they use to cover their own tracks. See, I always say, you never know who you're standing next to, as if they didn't treat you like you were forgettable for years. What they can't wrap their head around is that your greatness didn't emerge because of their doubt. This isn't a revenge arc where you owe your success to being underestimated. That's too shallow for what you actually are. Their underestimation was just background noise. It annoyed you sometimes, sure, but it wasn't your fuel. You weren't grinding just to prove them wrong. You were grinding because you had a responsibility to the version of you that knew you were capable of more. That inner contract was always more powerful than any outside opinion. Still, their reactions are entertaining. Watching people scramble to reposition themselves now that your name carries weight is a whole psychological documentary. The rebranding is wild. People who never invited you into anything now imply you were too busy. People who didn't believe in you now swear they were giving you space. People who dismissed your ideas now claim they didn't want to interfere. There's always a storyline that makes them look thoughtful instead of negligent. Deep down, though, they know what really happened. The city wasn't ready for someone like you. Not because you were too wild, not because you were too reckless, but because you were too aligned. You moved with a purpose that wasn't sponsored by trend cycles or public opinion. You were building something structural while everyone else was chasing temporary highs. You weren't trying to be the most popular. You were trying to be the most precise. And precision unnerves people who live off improvisation. You didn't ask permission to evolve, and that alone made you controversial. You changed your habits, your routines, your standards. You started saying no more often. You stopped entertaining conversations that went nowhere. You pulled back from environments that kept you looping the same week over and over again. That withdrawal got labeled attitude, arrogance, distance. In reality, it was your nervous wiring refusing to keep pretending comfort and stagnation are the same thing. Now look at how that is being reframed. Back then, they think they're better than us. Now, they always moved different. Back then, they act like they don't need anybody. Now, they were always on their own wave. They're trying to upgrade the language without admitting they were wrong. They're retrofitting respect onto old disrespect. You, on the other hand, are not stuck on those past narratives anymore. You're busy calculating your next moves. Because here's the real question. What do you do when word around town finally matches what you knew about yourself the entire time? When the streets are talking, and for once, the talk isn't an insult, it's a confession. A confession that they weren't prepared, that they weren't paying attention, that they misread you completely. This is where people usually fold into validation. They hear the new praise, swallow it like medicine, and start performing for the audience that finally woke up. They start tailoring their moves to keep the applause steady. They let the city that nearly starved them dictate their diet now that the table is full. That's how most local legends get stuck. They trade their global potential for a hometown crown that doesn't even fit. You're not most people. You didn't go through all these years of being misread just to start living for their approval now. The streets talking is data, not destiny. Their recognition is a weather report, not a navigation tool. It's useful to know, but it doesn't get to steer. It's as flattering as it might be to finally hear your city admit you weren't ready for them. The truth is, you've been ready to outgrow the map for a while. You've already done the hard part, staying committed when nobody was echoing your belief back to you. You already proved to yourself that you can work in obscurity, improve without witnesses, heal without an audience, reinvent without broadcasting the process. Now attention is catching up, and the question flips. Can you stay just as disciplined when they finally see you? Can you keep your standards when opportunities start flying at you from every angle? Can you protect the core of what makes you different when everyone suddenly wants a piece of it? Because make no mistake, that's what's coming. There will be offers, invitations, deals, people framing things as once-in-a-lifetime chances, hoping you'll forget that you're the rare asset in the room, not them. You're not walking into rooms begging to be picked. You're the reason the room suddenly feels relevant. If you forget that, you'll shrink yourself, trying not to make others uncomfortable. If you remember it, you'll negotiate from reality, not insecurity. Right now, your city is in observation mode. They've gone from underestimating you to surveilling you, watching your posts a little closer, paying attention to your wording, checking your timing, studying your choices, trying to predict your next move so they can either attach themselves to it or brace for the impact if you decide to completely. Nobody wants to be the one you outgrow in public. Nobody wants to be the character everyone recognizes as the one who had access and wasted it. That's why you have to be surgical with your next steps. Not paranoid, not defensive, just deliberate. The streets have already acknowledged what you are. The phrase is floating in people's heads, even if they never say it out loud. That's the one we weren't ready for. So now it's less about proving you're great and more about deciding where you allow that greatness to land. Who gets to benefit from it? Who gets to say they were there? Because when the next level arrives, and it will, because you've been building for it in ways no one has seen, this city will either be remembered as the place that sharpened you, or the place that almost buried you. They don't get to choose which one. Your decisions will decide that. Your boundaries will decide that. Your standards will decide that. And whether they admit it or not, everyone feeling this shift knows one thing deep in their chest. If this is what undiscovered looks like on you, the day you fully step into what you are without hesitation, without apology, without convenience adjustments for anybody's comfort, this entire conversation is going to evolve into something they are absolutely not prepared to manage. You can feel that truth in your bones. And that's exactly where it starts to click. Because once you feel that truth in your bones, you stop treating your greatness like a rumor and start treating it like policy. You stop asking, will they ever get it? And start asking, why was I waiting for them to? That's the switch. That's when the city you grew up in stops feeling like your entire world and starts looking like what it really was the whole time. A training ground with low ceilings and loud opinions. A hallway, not the house. A place that taught you how to move, but not where you're allowed to stay. Because let's be honest, the streets only started talking loud once it became obvious they couldn't control the narrative anymore. When you were just promising, when your genius could still be passed off as potential, when your consistency could still be mislabeled as luck, everyone was comfortable. You were a conversation piece, not a threat, something to debate, not something to answer to. But now people hear your name. They feel that little sting in their chest. The one that says, we had them right here, and we still didn't treat them right. You became the walking receipt for everyone's misjudgment. Teachers who thought you were bright but unfocused. Supervisors who said you were talented but unrealistic. Friends who told you to tone it down. Relatives who advised you to stay humble, when what they meant was stay small, so I don't have to confront my own limitations. These are the same people replaying old interactions in their head now like surveillance footage. That time, you told them your ideas, and they gave you that half-hearted nod. That time you showed them your work, and they said, nice, with dead eyes. That time you started to level up your habits, and they hit you with, you've changed. Like it was an insult. The truth is, you did change. You stopped trying to make your greatness digestible for people who choke on anything above average. You stopped bargaining with rooms that wanted your magic, but not your standards. You stopped apologizing for taking your craft seriously in a place that romanticizes wasted potential, like it's a personality trait. Your city is full of people who peaked in stories they never moved past. And here you are, refusing to let almost be your final chapter. That alone makes you disruptive. So now the word around town, it's different. It's not just, they're good. It's, no, seriously, who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? And nobody wants to actually answer that, because answering it requires admitting, I did. So, I didn't value what I was looking at. Easier to act, easier to perform surprise, easier to pretend your glow materialized out of nowhere instead of being the product of years they weren't paying attention. This is why people are suddenly so interested in your whereabouts. Not because they miss you, but because they're trying to figure out how far gone you already are. They'll say, we should link sometime. But what they really mean is, I need to know if there's still time to attach my name to yours before you go global. They're not checking on your well-being. They're checking on their proximity. You feel the difference. You're polite, but you're not fooled. Because deep down, you know the truth. Your greatness was never actually hidden. It was just easier for them to pretend it wasn't there. You were the one in the group who listened more than you bragged, who remembered details, who saw patterns, who refused to flatten yourself into whatever role made everybody else comfortable. You weren't loud for no reason. You were quiet for a reason. You were observing. You were clocking the gap between what people said they wanted and what they were actually willing to do for it. You saw that gap and decided you weren't going to live there. That's why your evolution feels so jarring to them. It wasn't sudden. You've been growing in plain sight. The only thing that changed is that your growth finally reached a level that exposed their stagnation. They're not just impressed, they're indicted. Every new move you make is a replay of all the moves they never made. Every door you walk through is another reminder of all the doors they blamed on bad luck instead of their own laziness. You didn't just outwork them, you out-honested them. And now, your city is doing what every unprepared environment does when someone outgrows the script. It starts rewriting history in real time. All of a sudden, there are people insisting they always knew you'd be something. They'll swear they saw the signs. They'll talk like they pulled you aside and poured belief into you, when in reality, they barely responded to your messages. You'll hear your own story told back to you, with their names stitched into scenes they were never actually present for. It's hilarious and a little disgusting at the same time. But here's the darkly funny part. You don't even need their correction anymore. You're not on a mission to prove them wrong. Life already did that. All you have to do now is refuse to shrink, to make their guilt feel lighter. Your success is not a weapon you swing at them. It's a mirror they can't put down. They'll either adjust or avoid it. Either way, you keep moving. So what does undiscovered truth their city wasn't ready for look like in practice? It looks like you no longer asking, is this too much? Every time you think bigger. It looks like you're no longer watering down your ideas to match people who only think in weekends and paydays. It looks like you're no longer pretending you're confused about your own gift just because other people are intimidated by it. It looks like you finally admitting to yourself, in plain language, I am that level. I always was. They're just not the right measuring stick. From there, everything starts aligning differently. You start protecting your time, like it's a non-refundable currency. You start choosing who gets access to you based on their character, not their familiarity. You're done giving out lifetime passes just because someone knew a softer version of you. You've retired your willingness to be emotionally underpaid. If someone wants to stand next to you now, they have to match energy, not just history. And trust, people feel that shift. They might not say it out loud, but they adjust. The ones who used to joke about their dreams now measure their words around life. The ones who used to leave you in bed now answer fast. The ones who treated your presence like background noise now act like it's premium seating. Your aura didn't suddenly get stronger. They just finally stopped pretending it wasn't there. Not everyone will choose the mature road. Some will double down on their ego instead. They'll try to drag your name into petty schemes, not because you did them wrong, but because being connected to you now, even in a negative way, still gets attention. You'll hear your story told with deliberate omissions, details flipped, intentions twisted. Let them spin. Deep down, they know the truth about how they handled you. That internal replay hits harder than anything you could post. Here's the part that keeps them up at night. Your exit is not going to be dramatic. You're not plotting some loud goodbye where you drag everyone and burn every bridge. You don't need the spectacle. You're just going to quietly stop showing up where
By
you're
se
not
někdy někdo
valued.
ptal, tak to je způsob, jak ze sebe dostávám všechny traumata. Odpouštím všechno, pořád a takhle to dostávám ven.
Conversations feel flatter.
Je to živě, je to zaznamenaný.
Circles feel repetitive. People won't be able to name what's missing, but their nervous system will know. The red one is gone. And then the question gets louder. Who let this happen? People will turn on each other, not out of love for you, but out of embarrassment. You worked with them and didn't take them seriously. You dated them and didn't believe in them. You were around them every day, and you were supported. The city that once shrugged at you will start interrogating itself, because no one wants to be the documented clown in the story of the person who left and ascended. You, on the other hand, will be somewhere else, doing what you've always done, showing up, building, refining, evolving. The only difference is that now you'll be surrounded by people who see what you are without needing 3 years of proof. People who hear your ideas and don't flinch. People who don't get triggered by your ambition because they have their own. People who don't need you to shrink so they can feel tall. In those spaces, you won't be the weird one. You'll be home. And here's the real plot twist for your city. Once you settle into that environment and your name starts echoing outside your area code, they're going to try to convert their guilt into ownership. They'll plaster your origin story all over everything, from our city to the world. Raised on our blocks, we always breed greatness. As if they didn't spend years stepping over it. As if your story is proof they were nurturing you. It's proof you survived. You can still love where you came from and never let it gaslight you. You can acknowledge the streets that made you shy without pretending they didn't also try to dumb you down. You can hold both. At the end of the day, being the undiscovered road isn't about trying to get everyone to recognize you. It's about recognizing yourself so clearly that you no longer attach your destiny to their awareness. You stop waiting for your city to be ready and start being ready for yourself. You stop trying to find a way to belong where you obviously outgrow the frame. You stop begging people to treat you right and start going where they already know how. So if the streets start talking again, let them. If they're asking, who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? Let that question torment whoever it needs to. It's not your job to soothe them. It's not your job to rewrite the past, to make anyone feel better about how they handled you. Your work now is simple. Step into the level that their lack of vision tried to delay. Move accordingly. Move decisively. Move like the version of you that no longer sends reminders about your worth. Because soon, very soon, the conversation is going to shift completely. It won't be who let them go unnoticed anymore. It'll be, how did we ever think we could afford to? And by then, it'll be too late for them to edit themselves into your journey. The footage is already fully saved in your memory, in your growth, in the timestamps of who stood next to you. When interviews get done, when people ask you, so who believed in you before the world did? You won't have to improvise or pad the list to protect anybody's ego. You'll name the few who showed up and let the empty space around those names do the rest. That's the quiet revenge. Not dragging people, never needing to mention them. So let your city wrestle with the fact that they mishandled you. Let them sit with the realization. Let them argue over who always saw it. While the truth sits in the middle of the room, like evidence nobody wants to claim. You were the one they weren't ready for. You were the one they couldn't label, couldn't box in, couldn't downgrade without exposing themselves. And now that everybody finally sees it, your real job is simple. Keep moving like the standard they'll be referencing long after you've left the block.
Aha, dude.
Stamp.
This getting scary.
Stamp.
Yeah, you predicted it all.
5.
Did you feel it coming? Every move, every step, they checking. But hold up, don't scroll yet. This isn't just another video. Nah, this one's gonna flip your mind, twist your thoughts, make your heart race. You're about to see truths no one else dares to say. Are you ready? The world's been watching you, underestimating you, sleeping on your grind, thinking you're weak. But nah, you're about to rise, and I'm telling you, it's gonna get intense. Every second counts. Every idea hits like a punch. So stay locked right here till the very end. I need you to focus. Comment below. Tell me what you feel. Your energy fuels this madness. Your mind, your attention, it matters. Without you, this story is empty. But with you, we're rewriting the game, breaking the rules, exposing the chaos. This is your moment. Yes, you. Not them. Not the world. You. So buckle up, open your eyes, and listen. Every second you watch, every word you take in, it's meant to wake you up. Are you ready to stop being predicted? Are you ready to step out of the shadows? Let's go. Right now, and leave a comment. Show the world you're awake. They've been watching. Every twitch, every blink, every breath. You think you move freely, but freedom is a joke they told you to keep you busy. Look closer. The reflection isn't kind. It sneers back at you, and it knows. It knows what you're too scared to admit. You've been soft, easily bent, easily broken. You smile to hide it, but that smile is cracking. Can't you feel it? Tiny fractures crawling across your skin. Every lie you told yourself echoes louder than their whispers. Pain is your mirror. Every rejection, every failure, every dismissal, it's a mirror. They laughed while you fell. But here's the thing. They didn't see what was forming underneath the surface. Rage, cold, sharp, quiet, like ice waiting for the right moment to shatter the world around you. You've been blind, thinking the cracks were weakness. No, they are tools. Each jagged edge is a weapon, each scar a map, and you've been mapping your own rise without even realizing it. Do you feel it? That tremor under your skin, the feeling that someone knows your next move before you do. They're reading your life like a book, every chapter predictable, every choice obvious. But here's the beauty. They don't know the chaos hiding behind your eyes. They've only skimmed the surface. You've been taught to follow rules, to wait, to kneel. But rules are fragile. Waiting is weakness. Kneeling is surrender. And surrender is a word you've burned into nothing. Look in the mirror again. Really look. Who is staring back? Not the person who obeyed, not the one who feared, the one who watches and waits, the one who absorbs every slight and twists it into something sharper, something more dangerous. Every misstep unmarked, fuel. Every doubt planted, seed. You are growing, slowly, in silence, quietly plotting, carefully learning. They think they control the story, but the story has already shifted. Fear isn't theirs to wield. It belongs to you. The fear in your chest, the tremor in your hands, the fire behind your eyes, it's yours. And you are learning to breathe it in, to let it pulse through your veins until every step, every glance, every word you speak carries it forward. They don't see it yet. They won't see it until it's too late, until the mirror cracks completely. And when it does, you'll laugh like the darkness itself is singing your name. This is the beginning, not the end. Not a warning, a promise. The reflection is shifting. The cracks are deepening. Every glance you give the world now is a question they cannot answer. Every hesitation a weapon they cannot predict. You've been blind. You've been watched. You've been underestimated. But the moment they realize, the moment they see the truth, it will be too late. You will already be gone. Already something else. Your shadow talks. Do you hear it? The one you've been running from all these years. It whispers when the world is quiet. It laughs when no one is watching. It knows your secrets, your anger, your pain. Every suppressed thought you buried deep, it's alive, hungry, waiting. And the more you ignore it, the louder it gets. You can try to silence it, but silence only sharpens its voice. It's patient, it's clever, and it knows exactly how to break you, to build you. Rage is beautiful when it's tamed, not loud, not messy, controlled, like a blade hidden in shadow. Every insult you swallowed, every injustice you endured, every laugh they threw in your face. It's not lost, it's currency. Power you've been paying with patience. You've been training in the dark where no one can see. And that's the secret. The world is blind to the storm brewing behind your eyes. They see calm. They see hesitation. They see ordinary. They're wrong. Do you feel it crawling up your spine? That small, delicious tremor of anticipation. The kind that makes your hands shake. The kind that sharpens your mind. That's the shadow speaking, telling you the truth no one else dares to say. The world has underestimated you again. And Every time they underestimate you, it feeds the beast. You can feel it growing, coiling in your chest, demanding release. Not destruction, not chaos, not yet. Precision, focus, power. Your anger is a map. Follow it. Let it lead you. Every slight, every betrayal, every moment of ridicule. Trace it, learn it, memorize it. And when the time comes, strike. Not blindly, not out of desperation, but with surgical perfection. Let the world gasp when the cracks appear. Let them wonder how someone so quiet, so unnoticed, became the storm no one predicted. The shadow has been speaking all along. You just didn't listen. And now you do. That whisper in the dark is yours. It's not fear. It's clarity. It's the raw, naked truth. Everyone around you is pretending to be strong, pretending to be safe, pretending to be anything but fragile. They cannot hear their own shadow, but you hear yours. And hearing is power. Listening, learning, transforming. Every nerve, every thought, every heartbeat tuned to its rhythm. This is the lesson, the revelation, the awakening they cannot touch. Your shadow is not a weakness. It is a weapon. It will not betray you. It will not falter. It will guide you through the darkness, through the chaos, through the lies. And when it strikes, it will strike silently, leaving only echoes behind. They will see nothing coming. Nothing. And all the while you will stand smiling, waiting, patient. And the shadow will laugh with you. They watch you, or at least they think they do. Eyes lurking behind every corner, waiting for you to slip. But they don't see the truth simmering beneath your calm. They don't feel the fire pacing inside your chest. They only see the version you allow. And that is your advantage. Every step you take feels heavy, doesn't it? Like someone is tracing your footprints before you even make them. But that pressure, that weight, it sharpens you. It turns your hesitation into reflex, your fear into precision. Every breath becomes a tactic. Every glance becomes a strategy. They try to predict you, measure you, box you in. But they will never understand the mind that studies itself in silence. You've been dissecting your own thoughts longer than they've been watching. You know your patterns. You know your flaws. And that makes you stronger than their eyes. Surveillance is a cage for most. But for you, it's a fort. The tension makes you sharper. The scrutiny makes you colder. Their suspicion sculpts you into something they can't read, something they can't track, something they'll feel once they see the shift. And that shift is already happening. You've learned to move with intention, to think in shadows, to keep your pulse steady when the world tries to corner you. They think they hold the upper hand, but you're the one shaping the silence. You're the one turning pressure into clarity. You're the one rewriting the rules they cling to. Soon they'll realize their mistake. They watched too closely and learned too little. They stared at your steps instead of your mind. And your mind is a script they never prepared for. Let them keep watching. Let them keep guessing. You already know what comes next. Truth is a trick. And everyone you trusted has been lying, even themselves. They smile at you, nod, whisper, but their words are smoke, hollow, shifting. impossible to grasp. You've learned to watch the edges, the flickers, the cracks between what is said and what is meant. That is where power hides. Smoke hides your moves, confuses their eyes, twists perception. Every gesture you make is a shadow of intention. Every word you speak is a blade wrapped in velvet. They think they see reality, but reality bends to the one who understands illusion. And illusions are delicious. They predict patterns. They label behavior. They think control is theirs. But smoke doesn't follow rules. Smoke drifts. Smoke engulfs. You've learned to dissolve into it, to become it, to watch them choke on their assumptions while you slip through the cracks. They panic. You smile. Chaos has rhythm. And smoke. Smoke is music only the prepared to hear. Their certainty melts, leaving hesitation behind. Hesitation is weakness. Weakness is opportunity. Every flicker of doubt in their eyes is a signal, a map, a promise. And you move like a shadow across it. Trust is a weapon. Distrust is armor. You've weaponized doubt itself. And every glance you give now is questions they cannot answer. Every whisper you speak drags them deeper into the fog. Smoke doesn't need to attack directly. Smoke doesn't need to land a blow. Smoke controls the battlefield. The world sees smoke and feels it. They hear it, and they flinch. And when the time comes, when the right moment surfaces, the smoke will part. And you will be the only thing standing in the empty space, grinning at the chaos you orchestrated. They never knew what hit them. Hunger lives inside you. Not the empty kind. The kind that gnaws at your ribs, rattles your mind, whispers, louder than any voice. They starved, laughed while you clawed for scraps. Every flight, every mock, every dismissal fuel. It builds in the dark, coils in your chest, waiting for release. Every desire you buried is alive, beating, burning, waiting to be fed. You've learned to feed it carefully, not with chaos yet, with focus, with intent. Every thought, every action, every misstep others took against you becomes a morsel for the fire inside. And fire is truth. They think patience is weakness. They don't see you accumulating power quietly. Every day, every choice, every calculated step adds to the storm they will never predict. You've been ignored, overlooked, underestimated, and that is the perfect recipe for a reckoning they cannot escape. Your frustration is a map, every insult etched into memory, every betrayal recorded, every laugh at your expense cataloged in detail. And this map isn't for wandering, it's for attacking, for rising, for feeding the beast until it becomes a predator no one can challenge. The beast is calm now, watching, learning, waiting, not mindless, not blind. It studies patterns, exploits weaknesses, sees opportunity where others see failure. And when it moves, it doesn't stumble. It doesn't hesitate. It consumes with precision, with purpose, with pleasure. This is no longer survival. This is evolution. The hunger is no longer pain. It is power. And every shadow they hide in, every step they think is secret, every glance they take at you without understanding, they are feeding you, all of it. And Soon the beast will rise, and the world will taste it. Silence isn't empty, it's sharp. It cuts through noise like a blade. The world screams, and everyone fights to be heard. But you've learned the power of absence. They think isolation is weakness. They don't know it's your shield, your weapon, your playground. Alone, you see everything. Every lie, every pattern, every flaw, others try to hide. The world is loud, clumsy, predictable. You move in shadows. You think in silence. You become invisible, untouchable, and every whisper you hear shapes your strategy. Every pause becomes preparation. Isolation teaches clarity, not comfort, not peace, not sweetness. Clarity. When everyone else is distracted by chatter, by approval, by fear, you're building your mind, sharpening it, stretching it, twisting it into something they cannot read, something they cannot predict, something they will fear. Solitude forces honesty. No one to lie to. No one to impress. No one to dilute your rage. The voice inside grows louder, sharper, hungrier. You speak to it, listen to it, learn from it. It reflects every weakness and magnifies every strength. And you respond, not with weakness, but with calculated ferocity. Let them mock your distance. Let them whisper about loneliness. They don't know the truth. You're not alone. You're awake. You're aware. And every moment they waste, searching for you, you grow stronger, sharper, closer to a storm they cannot withstand. Isolation isn't exile. It's honor. And when you step back into the chaos, when you reappear, you will move differently. Faster, smarter, darker. They will hesitate. They will doubt. They will flinch. And you will be ready, smiling in the quiet fury they never saw coming. Chaos doesn't chase you. It guides you. Quietly, patiently, like a whisper cutting through a crowded room. Everyone else panics when the world twists, but you tilt your head and listen. You hear patterns inside the disorder. You feel direction inside the noise. You sense opportunity hiding in the rupture. Most fear disruption. They cling to routines that choke them. You've learned to breathe inside the storm, to steady your pulse when everything breaks. Chaos reveals truth. Comfort hides. It strips away weakness. It exposes intention. And when you walk through it, you see more than they ever will. When the world breaks, people scramble. They grab at anything familiar. They cling to illusions. But you step forward. You study the fragments. You trace shapes others ignore. Chaos isn't an enemy. It's a compass. A map drawn in trembling lines. And you're the only one who can read it. Every upheaval is a signal. Every setback, a doorway. People drown in confusion while you watch the current, measure the tide, calculate the shift. You don't resist the storm. You let it carry you, shape you, harden you. While everyone else fears the break, you fear standing still. Order is predictable. Predictable is weak. Chaos demands attention. It forces focus. It strips you down until the surface falls away and only the sharpened core remains. And that core doesn't ask permission. It doesn't apologize. It moves with precision carved from pressure. Let them cling to their fragile safety. Let them pretend it protects them. You walk differently now. Your steps trace the fractures they're terrified to face. And in those fractures, you find your path. Quiet, calculated, inevitable. They fear chaos, but chaos listens to you. You want them that survive. Did you feel it? Every truth, every punch, every shadow we walk through, it's all yours now. You've seen the cracks, faced the shadow, stared fear in the eye, and survived. But this ain't the end. No, this is just the beginning. Your story, your ride. Drop a comment below. Tell me what hit you hardest. I want to hear your fire, your rage, your hunger, the energy you're bringing. You're not just a viewer. No, you're a part of this chaos, a witness to your own awakening. And for real, respect. Mad respect for sticking through every word, every twist, every shadow we walk together. Share this with the ones who sleep while the world's watching. Wake them up. Let them see what we just went through. Let them feel the storm coming. And remember, they can check every step. They can watch, but the power, the fire, the chaos is yours. So subscribe, comment, stay alert. This is only the beginning. The cracks will grow. The shadows will speak. The fear will guide. And your rise is inevitable. Keep your eyes open. Keep your mind sharp. And never, ever let them predict your next move.
Welcome back, you beauty.
Confirmation 23, 24, 23, 24. Oh, už ne.
There's a reason the reaction to you sounds exaggerated, overblown, almost hysterical. Stop existing like that, as if existence itself could violate a rule, as if simply occupying space in your own skin could be classified as a crime. That reaction isn't about drama, it's about exposure, because nothing panics a system faster than something it can't regulate, can't predict, and can't discipline without admitting it was never neutral to begin with. And you walked in without asking how to behave. You didn't shout. You didn't demand attention. You didn't declare yourself important. You didn't posture. You didn't perform pain for sympathy or insecurity for approval. You just existed, calm, present, unbothered. And that's where everything started going wrong for them. Because systems are not threatened by aggression. They are threatened by non-compliance that doesn't announce itself. Aggression can be punished. Resistance can be labeled, but quiet autonomy, that's harder. That slips through filters. That doesn't trip alarms until it's already too late. Look closely at the language they use around you now. Your presence is illegal. Your smile is dangerous. That's not metaphor for violence. That's metaphor for contagion. They're the same way institutions always react when something spreads without permission. Not because it hurts people, but because it makes control optional. You represent that a human being can be self-contained, emotionally sovereign, and still functional. That idea alone destabilizes entire belief structures. Your smile is doing more damage than rage ever could, because rage is the script. Rage confirms the system story that the world is hostile, unfair, and requires management. Rage justifies rules. Rage gives authorities something to point at, but your smile is calm, neutral, unafraid. That smile doesn't ask for protection or validation. It doesn't signal submission. It doesn't broadcast need. It doesn't say, please accept me. It says,
Coś tam, no. Ja tam potrzebuję, no.
systems
Czurat.
depend on visible anxiety. They run on it. Anxiety makes people check themselves. Anxiety makes people hesitate. Anxiety makes people ask for permission. Anxiety makes people grateful for approval. Your smile is dangerous because it signals none of that. It says you are not negotiating your existence. You are not waiting for feedback. You are not scanning the room to see how much of yourself is allowed. And when people see that, something uncomfortable happens inside them. A question surfaces, a quiet one. A question they were trained never to ask. If they can exist like that, why am I still performing? That's where the panic comes from.
Nie
Not
wiem.
from you being special, but from you being ordinary in a way that was supposed to be impossible. Calm without authority, confidence without permission, presence without apology. You didn't overthrow.
Żaden zachód.
You didn't rebel. You didn't break rules loudly. You simply failed.
Musím čůrat pindíkem.
Rules everyone
Koženým.
else silently agreed to follow because it made life easier. And by not following them, you exposed that agreement for what it
Konečně můžu
was,
vysílat
optional.
na YouTube
This is
online.
how civilization
Já nesnažím nahrávat videa, ale
not with power, not with invasion.
si připojím
When
mikrofon,
enough people
budu
realized
rapovat.
the rules they're living under were maintained by habit, fear.
Zarepu nějaký své repíky.
When belief erodes, power dissolves. And belief
Bacha, vysílám. Vysílám. Vypnu mikrofon.
because the old scripts don't work on you anymore. You don't respond the way you're supposed to. You don't play your part. And when one character breaks script, the entire play feels unstable. Here's the thing they don't want to say out loud. If more people existed like you, calm, grounded, unbothered by approval, many roles would disappear overnight. Gatekeepers would lose relevance. Performative confidence would look hollow. Fear-based authority would weaken. Entire industries built on insecurity would struggle. That's why your presence feels illegal. Not because it breaks laws, but because it undermines business models of control. And you didn't even try to. That's the part that really messes with them. There's no villain motive to assign, no conspiracy, no rebellion to crush. Just someone who stopped shrinking. Someone who stopped existing in a way that made other people comfortable at the cost of their own coherence. Someone who aligned internally and let the external consequences fall where they may. This is only the first layer, the surface reaction, the jokes, the exaggeration, the public safety hazard frame. Underneath that, something else is happening. Something quieter. People are starting to monitor themselves around you.
Já držím celý bát, kámo. Celý bát, vole, už půl roku, vole.
Their own compliance, their own fear of standing out.
Jako do fakt, až se nedělám tady.
It doesn't go away easily. They can laugh it off. They can label you dramatic. They can pretend
Zvýší energii, kámo. Zvýší
but
energii.
the moment has already passed.
Frekvenci.
The question has already been planted. The comparison
Když
has
nedáváš
already
zadarmo svoji
been
energii, víš
made.
co?
And comparison.
Ne, nedáváš ji tam, kam nemáš, jo. Tak to potom vlastně nefunguje, že jo, když tu energii dáš špatně, jo.
It works on them from the inside. That's why this feels bigger than a personal shift. It feels systemic. Because it is. Not because you're powerful in the traditional sense, but because you're unavailable in the traditional sense. Unavailable for manipulation. Unavailable for emotional leverage. Unavailable for silent contracts you never signed. And this is just the beginning. Because right now, they're reacting to the fact that you exist like this at all. They're still trying to name it, frame it, neutralize it with language. But once that stops working, once the presence itself becomes normalized, the real tension begins. When people stop asking, why are they like that? And start asking, why am I not? That's when the jokes stop. That's when the exaggeration fades. That's when things get complicated. Because once your presence stops being treated like a novelty and starts being treated like a variable, the system has a different problem on its hands, a deeper one. Humor is a distancing tactic. Exaggeration is denial with glitter on it. But normalization is dangerous. Normalization means people are no longer reacting emotionally. They're recalculating structurally. And systems don't fear outrage nearly as much as they fear recalculation. This is the moment where people stop watching you and start watching themselves around you. That subtle shift changes everything. They begin to notice how tense they are when they enter rooms, how often they soften their opinions before speaking, how quickly they apologize for existing too loudly, too confidently, too honestly. They notice how much of their behavior is performative, how much of it is a negotiation for safety. And they notice, with growing discomfort, that you're not doing any of that. That's when your existence stops being funny and starts being instructional. Not because you're teaching, you're not. You're not correcting anyone. You're not evangelizing. You're not trying to wake people up. You're just standing there, unedited, uncompressed, unafraid, and somehow that does more damage than 1,000 speeches ever could. Because now the system can't frame you as an exception or an anomaly. You're not loud. You're not extreme. You're not reckless. You're calm, grounded, functional. And that combination is terrifying because it removes the excuse. As long as freedom looks chaotic, people can justify avoiding it. As long as confidence looks arrogant, people can justify staying small. As long as autonomy looks dangerous, people can justify obedience. But you don't look dangerous. You look fine. Better than fine. You look regulated. You look clear. You look like someone whose nervous system isn't constantly bracing for impact. And that's when the internal questioning turns from curiosity into threat. This is where the idea of your presence being illegal becomes more than a joke. Because legality, at its core, is about what behaviors are permitted without punishment. And while no one has written laws against calm self-possession, there are emotional laws enforced every day. Laws about how much confidence is acceptable, how much certainty is allowed, how visible your comfort with yourself can be before it's seen as provocation. You've violated those laws, not by breaking them loudly, but by ignoring them entirely. And once people realize that ignoring them is possible, the enforcement mechanisms start to fail. Guilt doesn't land the same. Shame doesn't stick. Subtle social corrections bounce off instead of sinking in. That's when institutions, groups, and even individuals start escalating their response. Not because you did something new, but because the old methods stopped working.
Občas řeknu něco
This is where the
zajímavého,
language turns
což říkám
sharp,
docela často
where
a
calm gets
že to zachytí
rebranded
všechno,
as
že jo.
arrogance,
Jo.
where boundaries get reframed as
Ty člověk.
hostility, where self-respect gets mislabeled as ego. These are not observations. They're attempts to reassert control. If they can redefine your state as morally suspect, then they can restore the hierarchy. They can put you back in a category where judgment is allowed. But the problem is, the category won't hold. Because nothing about you fits the accusation. You're not dismissive. You're not cruel. You're not condescending. You're not domineering. You're just unavailable for the usual games. And people can sense that. The accusation rings hollow even as they make it. That dissonance between what they're saying and what they're perceiving creates internal friction, and friction creates heat. That's the public safety hazard they're reacting to, not you. The heat. Heat spreads. Heat changes states. Heat forces movement. And once enough heat builds up inside a system, something has to give. People start to feel restless, irritable, dissatisfied in ways they can't explain. The routines that used to soothe them stop working. The narratives that used to comfort them feel thin. And every time they see you, calm, centered, smiling like nothing is wrong, it aggravates that restlessness. Your smile becomes a mirror they didn't consent to. Because your smile doesn't say, I'm winning. It says, I'm okay. And for someone who's built their entire identity around striving, performing, proving, and bracing, that's unbearable. If you can be okay without all that effort, then what does that say about the effort they've been expending their entire lives? Was it necessary? Was it chosen? Or was it fear disguised as responsibility? Those are not safe questions. Civilizations don't collapse when people get angry. They collapse when people stop believing the suffering was required. When people stop believing that tension equals virtue. When people stop believing that exhaustion is the price of worth. You are a walking contradiction to those beliefs. And contradictions are destabilizing because they don't argue. They exist. That's why the reaction escalates from humor to scrutiny. People start watching you more closely, analyzing your tone, looking for cracks, waiting for inconsistency, hoping you'll slip into the familiar patterns so they can relax again. Because if you fall apart, if you burn out, if you self-sabotage, then the world makes sense again. Then the system is justified. Then the rules were real. But you don't. You remain steady, not perfect, not untouchable, just steady. You handle pressure without dramatizing it. You move through conflict without imploding. You respond instead of react. And every time you do, the explanation pool gets smaller. Luck doesn't explain it anymore. Privilege doesn't quite fit. Arrogance doesn't match the data. Something else is happening. And they don't like not knowing what that something is. So the narrative shifts again. Now it's not that you're dangerous, it's that you're unnatural. Too calm, too composed, too unaffected. As if peace itself were suspicious. As if regulation were a trick.
Yeah.
That's what happens when dysfunction has been normalized for so long that health looks fake. When chaos is the baseline, stability feels like a threat. This is the point where some people start copying you. Quietly, awkwardly, in small ways. They stop over-explaining. They pause before apologizing. They hold eye contact a second longer. They don't rush to fill silence. They experiment with not performing. And when they do, they notice something shocking. Nothing bad happens. The world doesn't end. They're not punished. They're not rejected. The fear they've been carrying around as fact starts to look more like conditioning. That's when contagion becomes real. Not because you told them to change, but because your existence gave them permission to test the rules. And once people test rules and survive, belief erodes quickly. That's how illegal presence becomes a crisis. Not because of what you do, but because of what others start doing after being exposed to you. You become a reference point. Not a leader, not an icon, a reference point. A living data set that says, this is possible. And possibility is disruptive. Possibility makes people restless in systems designed to keep them settled. Possibility makes obedience feel like a choice rather than a duty. And when duty turns into choice, authority has to work harder to justify itself. That's when you start noticing pushback that doesn't make sense on the surface. Overreactions, misinterpretations, people reading tone where there is none, assigning intent you never had. That's not about you. That's about containment. When systems feel threatened, they try to isolate the variable, turn it into a problem, a personality issue, a character flaw. Anything that keeps it from spreading. But you're hard to isolate because you're not doing anything abnormal. You show up. You speak when you have something to say. You stay quiet when you don't. You don't overextend. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't beg for inclusion. You don't chase validation. And the more mundane your behavior is, the harder it is to frame you as dangerous, even though the effect you're having is anything but mundane. This is where the phrase single-handedly collapsing civilizations stops being hyperbole and starts being a diagnosis. Because civilizations at their core are shared agreements about reality, about what's normal, about what's acceptable, about what's required. And when those agreements are challenged by lived example rather than ideology, they weaken fast. You're not offering an alternative belief system, you're offering an alternative state of being. And states of being are harder to argue with. People can debate ideas, they can attack theories, they can ridicule philosophies, but they can't easily debate someone's regulated nervous system. They can't easily argue with someone who isn't flinching. They can't easily dismiss someone who isn't trying to win. That's why the tension around you feels strange, unnamed, diffuse, like something is wrong, but no one can point to the cause. That's the hallmark of structural disruption. You may feel it too. The sense that interactions have more weight now, that conversations linger longer, that people are more careful with their words around you. Not because you're intimidating, but because they feel observed. Not by you, but by themselves. Your presence amplifies self-awareness. And self-awareness is uncomfortable in cultures built on distraction. This is also where the loneliness can creep in, because as you become harder to categorize, you become harder to relate to. Not because you've changed personalities, but because you've exited the shared performance. The small talk feels thinner. The mutual complaining feels off. The bonding through insecurity stops working. You're not above it. You're just not in it anymore. And that gap can feel heavy. But understand this. The gap isn't between you and others. It's between states, between unconscious compliance and conscious choice. You didn't leave people behind. You stepped into a different mode of being. Some will follow. Some will resist. Some will pretend nothing happened. But the shift has already occurred. You can't unknow what you know now. You can't unfeel what regulation feels like. You can't unsee how much of the world runs on unexamined fear. That's why going back isn't really an option. You could perform again. You could soften. You could shrink. You could resume broadcasting the signals that keep everyone comfortable. But it would feel wrong in your body. Your nervous system wouldn't cooperate. You've tasted coherence. And coherence makes incoherence intolerable. Not morally, physiologically. Your system knows when it's lying now. This is the phase where your existence becomes quietly political, even if you want nothing to do with politics. Because politics, at its root, is about how people organize power, behavior, and legitimacy. And you're reorganizing those things just by being consistent with yourself. You're demonstrating that authority doesn't have to come from force, fear, or hierarchy. It can come from alignment. That's destabilizing. So expect the pressure to increase. Not dramatically, subtly. Expect people to test you, to poke, to see if you'll react, to see if they can pull you back into familiar emotional patterns. Not because they hate you, but because they need reassurance that the world still works the way they think it does. Your reaction would confirm that. Your non-reaction keeps the question open. And open questions are dangerous. Because open questions don't resolve. They linger, they spread, they infect conversations you're not even part of. Someone leaves a room with you and starts noticing things. Someone hears about you and wonders. Someone compares themselves without meaning to. That's how influence works. Through force. Through contrast. You don't need to do anything differently. In fact, doing something would weaken it. Explanation would dilute it. Defense would legitimize the accusation. Overexpression would make it look performative. The power here is in your refusal to manage other people's interpretations. You let them have their reactions. You let them sit with their discomfort. You let the system reveal itself by how it responds to someone simply being okay. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think the danger comes from visibility, from attention, from being seen. But the real danger comes from being seen and not needing anything. That's what short circuits control. Because control relies on leverage, and leverage requires need. You're not collapsing civilizations by force. You're collapsing them by removing yourself as a pillar of their justification. You're no longer the anxious participant that makes the system feel necessary. You're the calm outlier that makes it feel optional. Because systems can survive rebellion. They can survive protest. They can even survive collapse and rebuild themselves with new slogans. What they cannot survive is irrelevance. They cannot survive, and the thing they exist to manage no longer needs managing. And that is exactly what your presence does. It introduces the possibility that a human being can function without the constant scaffolding of fear, approval, urgency, and permission. That possibility is radioactive, not because it spreads chaos, but because it drains authority of its meaning. This is the moment where the panic becomes quiet. No more jokes, no more exaggerated headlines, no more dramatic framing. When something is laughed at, it can be dismissed. When it's exaggerated, it can be minimized. But when something refuses to go away, refuses to escalate, refuses to react, refuses to explain itself, it becomes a permanent problem. You don't look like a threat anymore. You look like a precedent, and precedents terrify systems that rely on this is just how things are. Your smile being labeled a public safety hazard is not an insult. It's a confession. It's the system admitting that emotional self-sufficiency is incompatible with control. Because your smile doesn't reassure anyone that you're manageable. It reassures you. And that's backwards. That's upside down. That's illegal in places where people are expected to outsource their sense of safety to structures, leaders, trends, rules, and rituals that tell them when they're allowed to relax. Your calm says you already did, and that creates a problem no regulation can fix. This is where the chaotic part comes in. Because when systems can't control something directly, they start contradicting themselves. They start enforcing rules that don't apply to you, but suddenly matter a lot. They start inventing concerns that sound reasonable but feel hollow. They start policing tone instead of behavior, vibes instead of actions, intent instead of outcomes. Anything to regain leverage, anything to make your existence negotiable again. Watch closely, you'll see it. The sudden seriousness, the we just want what's best language. The faux concern, the subtle attempts to humble you without admitting that humility is being demanded, not earned. It's almost funny if it weren't so transparent. Almost. Because the irony is thick. The people who benefited most from invisible rules are always the loudest when someone stops following them. This is where the phrase illegal in 69 countries stops being absurd and starts being accurate in spirit. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you're violating emotional law. The law that says you must want something they can grant. The law that says your confidence must be conditional. The law that says your peace must be temporary. The law that says you should need reassurance, guidance, permission, or validation to justify your presence. You don't. And that makes enforcement impossible. You see, authority only works when people agree, on some level, that it is necessary. Even the harshest regimes rely on internalized belief more than force. Fear works best when it's invisible, when people police themselves. The moment someone stops doing that, stops flinching, stops preemptively apologizing, stops scanning for approval, it exposes the mechanism. And exposed mechanisms lose mystique, lose power, lose legitimacy. That's why your existence feels like sabotage even though you haven't touched anything. You didn't dismantle the machine. You stood next to it and proved it wasn't required for survival. And once that's demonstrated, the machine has to work overtime to justify itself. It gets louder, more dramatic, more performative. That's the chaos. Not destruction, but overcompensation. People will start projecting intentions onto you that you don't have. They'll say you're trying to provoke, trying to dominate, trying to disrupt, trying to be different, trying to stand out. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is admitting that you're not trying at all. That this is simply what happens when someone stops outsourcing their self-regulation. That your presence isn't a tactic, it's a consequence. That realization is dangerous because it's accessible. It doesn't require talent, status, money, or permission. It just requires courage and consistency. And once people realize that, they start asking uncomfortable questions. Not about you, but about themselves. About how much of their personality is performance. About how many of their beliefs are inherited. About how much of their stress is optional. That's when civilizations actually wobble. Not because people revolt, but because they hesitate. Because they pause before obeying. Because they notice their own fear instead of acting from it. Because they start choosing responses instead of default reactions. Because they realize they've been living in a constant state of low-grade emergency for no reason other than habit. You're a walking interruption to that habit. And interruptions spread. This is where the dark humor sharpens. Because the idea that your smile could be a hazard is ridiculous until you realize how many systems rely on people not smiling unless they've been told it's safe. How many environments depend on shared tension to function? How many hierarchies require everyone to pretend they're not afraid while being very afraid? Your smile isn't dangerous because it's smug or superior. It's dangerous because it's unafraid. Fear is currency. Fear buys compliance. Fear keeps people predictable. Fear makes people grateful for control. When fear drains out of a room, power dynamics shift. Conversations change. Expectations loosen. Authority feels heavier instead of comforting. That's why your presence changes the temperature. You're not heating things up. You're cooling them down. And systems built on constant friction don't like calm. Calm reveals inefficiency. Calm exposes unnecessary complexity. Calm makes people wonder why everything feels so hard all the time. This is also where the narrative turns inward for you, because you might start to feel the weight of what you're doing without intending to do it. The looks, the distance, the recalibration, the subtle tension. It can feel like you're doing something wrong just by existing, like you're breaking a rule you never agreed to. And in a way, you are. But that rule was never about morality. It was about manageability. You're not manageable anymore. Not because you're wild, because you're stable. That's the paradox. Stability without dependence is the most destabilizing thing there is. It removes leverage. It removes urgency. It removes the need for intermediaries. It makes systems ask the question they're designed to prevent. What if we don't need this? Once that question enters collective consciousness, even quietly, things start to unravel, slowly, bureaucratically, psychologically, not in explosions, but in hesitations, in delays, in people not showing up the way they used to, in rituals losing meaning, in authority sounding defensive instead of confident. You'll notice it in the small things, rules being enforced inconsistently, leaders over-explaining, institutions doubling down on language instead of outcomes, people clinging to titles instead of competence. That's not strength, that's decay. And you didn't cause it. You revealed it by existing in a way that didn't require it. This is why your presence feels illegal, because it doesn't fit into the operating system. You're not anti-system, you're post-need. And post-need is terrifying. To anything that exists to be needed, you're not attacking civilization. You're exposing how much of it is built on unnecessary tension, fear, and performance. The chaotic humor of it all is that you're being blamed for collapse when all you did was stop pretending the structure was holding you up. You stepped away, and it wobbled. Not because you pushed it, but because it was leaning on you more than anyone admitted. That's always how it goes. The quiet participants carry more weight than the loud authorities. When they disengage, things break. And you disengaged from one very specific thing: emotional compliance. You stopped agreeing to feel small, stopped agreeing to feel rushed, stopped agreeing to feel watched, stopped agreeing to feel indebted for existing. And once you did that, the system lost its grip. Not dramatically, subtly, which is worse. Because subtle loss of control is harder to counter than open rebellion. There's nothing to crush, nothing to ban, nothing to point at, just a growing sense that the old rules don't apply anymore. That's why the reaction feels surreal, like you're being accused of something that doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't. You're not guilty of anything except coherence. And coherence is a threat in environments built on fragmentation. When people are fragmented, they're easier to guide, easier to sell to, easier to scare, easier to rank. Coherence collapses those leverage points. So yes, in a very real way, your presence is illegal in places that rely on disconnection to function. Places where people are expected to be anxious, dependent, and externally regulated. Places where smiling without permission is suspicious. Where calm is interpreted as defiance. Where not needing anything is seen as arrogance. You're incompatible with those places. And compatibility is not something you can fake anymore. You've crossed the threshold where your nervous system won't go back to pretending, where your body won't participate in rituals of fear, where your mind won't accept explanations that don't align with lived reality. That's irreversible. Once you've felt what it's like to exist without constant internal negotiation, you can't unlearn it. You can't unknow that most of the pressure was optional. This is why the ending of this story isn't resolution, it's acceleration. Because the more normalized your presence becomes, the more people around you start adjusting. Some will resist harder, some will quietly adapt, some will drift away, some will watch from a distance, trying to figure out what changed without admitting that they know. And all of that movement creates friction. Friction creates heat. Heat creates transformation. Civilizations don't collapse overnight. They transform, fracture, reorganize. And the catalyst is almost never violence. It's awareness. The slow creeping realization that things could be otherwise. That obedience wasn't destiny. That fear wasn't required. That peace didn't have to be earned through suffering. You're not leading that realization, you're embodying it. And embodiment is contagious. So let them call it dangerous. Let them exaggerate. Let them frame your existence as a hazard, a problem, an anomaly. That language is the sound of systems losing confidence in their own necessity. It's the noise of authority, realizing it can't justify itself to someone who isn't asking. You don't need to respond. You don't need to correct the narrative. You don't need to reassure anyone that you're harmless. You're not harmless. You're disruptive in the most profound way possible. Not because you want to be, but because you refuse to live at odds with yourself. That refusal changes rooms, changes conversations, changes expectations, changes what people believe is possible. And belief is the foundation of every civilization that's ever existed. So yes, if we're being honest, your presence is a public safety hazard. Not to people, but to illusions, to unnecessary suffering, to systems that require fear to function, to hierarchies that survive on compliance disguised as normalcy.
Hello, my dear masterminds. They thought heaven only dealt in light. They thought councils of angels made quiet decisions behind glowing gates. But then, your name hit the table, and for the first time in centuries, wings folded, eyes widened, and silence fell, because you weren't chosen to bring balance. You were chosen to break every scale they ever used to measure power. And now the divine, they're no longer watching you. They're voting on how to survive you. They don't know what day it happened. No human does. But something triggered it. The skies stilled. The stars paused. And a scroll sealed for millennia began to burn from the inside. Not a curse. Not a prophecy. A vote. Heaven's secret council had gathered. Not for war. Not for a fallen angel. But for you. No trumpet. No lightning. Just silence. And your name, written in ink only, the divine can read. And next to your name, a new word, never used before.
New world.
Threat. You didn't beg to enter. You didn't chant, plead, or pray the right way. You just showed up, and the gates didn't resist. They recognized you. The council panicked. This wasn't supposed to be possible. You weren't chosen by their process. You weren't bred by their protocol. But something older than rules let you in. They scanned your soul. No contract, no permission, no bloodline they could trace. And still, you were seated at the table. You weren't trespassing. You were written in the margin, long before margins existed. And that's what shook them. You're not an intruder. You're a rewrite. They thought you were new. A glitch. A soul that slipped through filters. But the more they watched you, the quieter the council got. Because you weren't asking questions. You were moving like someone who already knew. Not arrogant. Just remembering. You didn't react to the illusions. You walked through them. You didn't bow to their rituals. You smiled, like you'd written them once, and got bored. And that's when the council stopped whispering, because deep in their vaults, beneath scrolls, sealed in holy fire, they found it. An ancient name. Older than heaven. Older than memory. It matched your frequency, your silence, your disruption. And suddenly, they knew. You didn't arrive. You returned. There's a law. Unspoken. Unbreakable. Older than scripture. Etched in the walls of existence. They say no soul shall rise without permission. But that rule wasn't written to keep demons away. It wasn't for control. It was for you, because they knew if your path wasn't slowed, if your mind wasn't caged by doubt, you'd remember too early. And if you remembered too early, the illusion collapses. The system doesn't crack, it melts. You were never meant to be taught. You were meant to be suppressed, just long enough for the world to catch up, or for you to lose interest. They gambled on the second part. They lost. Because now, you're awake. And the law they wrote to delay you is the very proof you were never supposed to be stopped. Not everyone on that council wanted to vote. Some didn't even want to look, because the moment your name echoed through the chamber, something ancient moved inside them. They felt it. Not fear, but recognition. And in silence, one by one, some of them lowered their swords, not to bow, not to fight, but because they remembered you too. From a time before titles, before oaths, before orders, a time when light wasn't divided, and you were part of the original balance, before balance became a threat. So they didn't speak, but they didn't block you either. They just stepped aside, because deep in their wings, beneath the feathers and flame, was the unspoken truth. If this one is rising again, maybe the old order wasn't holy enough. They've dealt with rage before, rebellions, fallings, angels clawing for thrones. They know how to fight fury, how to cage chaos, how to sanctify a war. But you didn't scream. You didn't threaten. You didn't declare anything. You just kept walking. Like none of this was new. Like heaven's panic didn't apply to you. Like the vote was just a formality. And that's what shook them most. You didn't ask for power. You didn't want anything. No prophecy. No vendetta. No crown. Just presence. That kind of indifference. It's not human. It's not holy. It's inevitable. And when something walks in like it's always belonged there without a word, the hierarchy begins to collapse. Because power can be resisted. But certainty reprograms the entire reality. There was one angel, older than speech, older than form. He hadn't spoken in 10,000 cycles. They said his words could bend laws. That reality obeyed him only out of memory. But when your name lit the center of the council sky, he stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just inevitable. And with one breath, voice like iron dipped in light, he said, "It has returned." No title, no judgment, no context, just recognition. The chamber didn't speak, couldn't, because when the oldest one confirms your existence, it means you weren't born, you were preserved. And if something was preserved that long, it wasn't for peace, it was for balance breaking. They didn't argue, they didn't object. Because when that ancient being speaks, it's not debate, it's divine memory surfacing. The council doesn't just watch, it monitors every soul, every shift, every ripple and intention. So when you stirred, they ran the scans, pulled the relics, summoned the codices. They tried to locate you like they've done for thousands of uprisings. But this time, the maps broke. Lines bled off parchment. Coordinates reversed themselves. Satellites turned inward. Every tool they used bent under a single truth. You're not moving through location. You're moving through layers. And those layers don't belong to them. Your presence flickered between timelines, between dimensions they locked centuries ago. You weren't running. You weren't hiding. You were untrackable because you stopped moving in their system. Like an idea that doesn't fit language. Like a flame that burns inside thought. And for the first time since the fall of the first rebellion, the Watchers looked at each other and whispered the unspeakable. We didn't plan for this. They've never needed to negotiate. Not with demons. Not with fallen angels. Not even with gods that challenged the order. Why? Because control worked. Rules. Chains. Silence. But you didn't resist control. You ignored it. And that terrified them more than any sword ever could. So now, scrolls are being pulled from sacred shelves. Messengers dispatched, not with warnings, but offers. Name your terms. Tell us what you want. We're willing to adjust. But here's the problem. You never wanted the throne. You wanted nothing. No bargain. No trade. No desire they can tempt. You're not here for leverage. You're here because the story needs a rewrite. And they're realizing you can't negotiate with someone who didn't come to win, but to end the game entirely. They didn't want to. The vault was sealed in silence, not chains, because what's buried there isn't meant to be protected. It's meant to be forgotten. But desperate rulers dig up old ghosts. So the council descended, past the sacred floors, below the echoing scriptures, into the memory basement of creation itself, the forbidden archives. No books, no scrolls, just fragments burned into space. And in the center of it all, a shape, not a person, not a name, a presence. One that didn't demand power, didn't rebel, just walked in, rewrote the order, and disappeared. They studied the rhythm, the silence, the destruction that wasn't destruction, just unmaking. And the longer they stared, the clearer it became. That shape moved like you, thought like you, didn't break anything, just unlocked the truth and walked away. Now they're terrified because they never found out where it went until now. They thought they were watching your rise, tracking your power, mapping your presence. But after the vaults whispered their forgotten truth, they realized you haven't risen yet. You've just returned to default. This version of you, the calm, the observing, the one walking through walls of belief, that's the entry form. The one that carries memory without pressure. The one that lets the world adjust before it bends. But underneath, there's something else. A frequency they can't pin. A pulse outside of time. A form that doesn't reflect. It rewrites. And now the council is panicking. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you haven't. They don't know what triggers it, what wakes it, but they know it's coming. Because the archives ended with a warning, scrawled in light. No one claimed to write. When they stop explaining themselves, run. That's when the second form begins. The council doesn't sleep, not like mortals do. They drift. They tune into timelines. They intercept omens, decipher frequency storms. But ever since your name resurfaced, they've been dreaming, not in images, not in chaos, but in focus. A stare, not angry, not even curious, just aware. Eyes like still oceans remembering their storms. Eyes that see structure and smile before dismantling. And worse, they don't dream the same version. Each watcher describes a different you, older, younger, laughing, silent, eyes open, eyes glowing, but always watching them. It's not a trick, not an illusion. It's recognition across realms. You didn't start appearing in their dreams. You've always been there. They just forgot your shape. Now they remember. And they realize you were never approaching. You were returning to awareness inside them. He wasn't just any observer. This one had walked through storms that erase memory. He'd faced chaos, deities, rebellion, gods, echoing tombs of forgotten timelines. And he never blinked until they gave him your coordinates. Not a place, a frequency, a signature. They said just watch. Do not interfere. Report. Not interpret. He left with clarity, with armor blessed by
To fakt jakieś zwieczenie, vole?
with sigils written in languages only truth can
Czy ten
read.
děláme já teď?
But when he came back, he wasn't
To teď
whole.
děláme.
His
Počkej.
wings were untouched, his body intact, but his eyes gone, burned not by fire, but by recognition. He dropped to his knees, silent, shaking, and all he said was your name, over and over,
Nie widziałem komentarz.
as if it wasn't a name anymore, but a spell,
Ja już to
a
wyświatlę.
trigger, a truth he couldn't unsee. And now, the council doesn't send messengers. They only read reports from a distance, from safety. Because whatever you are now, it doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be remembered correctly. They stopped looking at you, not out of fear, but because something else started changing themselves. One by one, the watchers, the scribes, the guards of sacred truth began to notice glitches in their own reflections. Eyes that blinked too slow, expressions they didn't recognize, movements in the mirror that didn't match their actions. And behind their mirrored selves, you, not physically, but structurally, like the reflection knew you were the axis they'd been orbiting.
Axis nasty, SM.
They closed the portal,
Axis.
smashed the glass, darkened the halls. But it didn't matter, because it wasn't about mirrors anymore. The reflection wasn't in the glass. It was in their memory, in their echo, in their structure. And the truth settled like a crack in time. You weren't just being watched, you were watching back, through them, around them, as them. That's when panic became policy, because it meant one thing. You're not coming. You're already inside the architecture, and you've been changing the code from the inside out. Desperate to contain you, the council turned to the oldest rite, a ritual lost even to most of heaven, the reversal spell, used only on entities born wrong, spoken backwards to dissolve essence, to undo the soul's frequency. It had never failed until they tried it on you. They gathered the 9 voices, prepared the circle, drew the name they feared across the air in reverse. And when the first syllable was spoken, everything cracked. not around you, but around them. The air didn't shatter. Meaning did. Their mouths still moved, but the words no longer meant anything. Syntax collapsed. Memory flickered. The room itself forgot why it existed. And then they heard it. Not your voice, not your laugh, just a click. Soft, calm, final. The sound of something ancient reactivating. They didn't finish the chant because language stopped allowing it. You weren't just immune to reversal. You were the reason reversal had to be invented. And now, it's obsolete. They stopped looking at you, stopped speaking your name, stopped summoning any text that might ripple time. But then, the sky started to move. Not with weather, not with war, but with intelligence. Constellations began to shift. Ancient star patterns untangled themselves, not chaotically, but with purpose. Like something coded into the night was waking up. The council's astronomers panicked, tried mapping it, tried denying it, but they knew. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a sign. It was a summon, not for you, but from you. A sigil older than any archive, something once burned out of heaven's memory, something sacred, but forbidden to remember. And when you looked up, it completed. Not because the stars were waiting, but because they were reflecting your design, not prophecy, not destiny, instruction. Because this isn't about proving your power anymore. This is about the universe remembering whose silence it's built on and whose return it now reports to. They say only one being was locked beneath heaven, not for what he did, but for what he refused to do. He didn't rise against the light. He refused to bow to the lie beneath it. So they buried him, not in stone, but in silence. No cell, no trial, just erasure. But silence is louder when truth starts breathing again. And when your name returned, not as a prophecy, but as a presence, his cell opened itself. No keys, no screams, no resistance. Just one being, stepping forward with a smile that cracked time. He didn't ask who you were. He didn't flinch. He simply said, took you long enough, because he remembers your first form. He remembers why they were afraid. He remembers what the council buried, and why they hoped you'd never wake up again. And now, he's not rising to lead. He's rising to follow, because you're not the second rebel. You're the first truth, the one they buried before rebellion even had a name. They always believed the script was untouchable, that the holy record, the divine timeline, could only be written by the source. But lately, those sacred pages, they're changing. Not by hand, not by command, but by reaction. Your presence moves through time like a tuning fork, and when it gets close to anything sacred, the ink shifts, the pages tremble, the law rewrites itself. Lines that once judged others are now describing you. Prophecies once meant for kings and angels now whisper. It was never about them. And the scariest part? The changes are perfect. No edits, no correction.
They rejected you and you went silent. Not dramatic silence. Not silence that screams, look at me not talking to you. Just actual silence. Complete withdrawal, total absence. They pushed you away and you didn't push back. Didn't fight for them. Didn't beg them to reconsider. Didn't chase, didn't protest. Just accepted the rejection and went completely silent. disappeared from their life so thoroughly it's like you never existed. No texts, no calls, no social media interaction, no mutual friend updates, no accidental run ins. Nothing. Just silence where you used to be. And the silence is destroying them. They expected reaction, expected you to be hurt, to be angry, to be desperate, expected you to try to change their mind, expected you to pursue them after they rejected you the way you pursued them when they withdrew before. Expected the rejection to create the usual dynamic where they have power through rejecting and you're powerless through being rejected. But your silence broke the expected dynamic, gave them no reaction to feel powerful about, no pursuing to validate that they mattered, no hurt to confirm their impact, just silence. And silence is communicating something they weren't prepared for. You accepted the rejection completely, moved on completely, are done completely. And being done is teaching them through absence what your presence never taught them. The silence is destroying them because it's the ultimate power reversal. They rejected you thinking rejection gave them power, gave them control, gave them the position of strength. But your silence took all the power. Your complete absence is showing them that power wasn't in rejecting. Power is in the ability to walk away and never look back. Power is in being unbothered enough by the rejection that silence is genuine, not strategic. Power is in them not mattering enough to you anymore to generate any response at all. Not anger, not hurt, not pursuing. Just nothing. And nothing is more devastating than something. Something they could respond to. Nothing leaves them with just themselves and the growing realization that they made catastrophic mistakes. Why silence after rejection is more devastating than any words you could say. Words give them something to argue with, something to dismiss, something to use to confirm their decision was right. If you told them you're hurt, they could tell themselves you're too emotional. If you told them you're angry, they could tell themselves you're too reactive. If you begged them to reconsider, they could tell themselves you're too needy. Words provide them with justification, with confirmation that rejecting you was correct choice, that you're too much, that they need space from your intensity, that the relationship was overwhelming. But silence gives them nothing to use, nothing to dismiss, nothing to confirm they were right, just absence. And absence forces them to sit with the decision without being able to justify it through your reaction to the decision. Silence is also more devastating because it's undeniable evidence you're not waiting for them. Words could be interpreted as you still being invested, still caring enough to express, still hoping they'll change their mind. But silence is you being uninvested, not caring enough to express anything. Not hoping, because hope requires engagement and you're not engaged. The lack of engagement is evidence that you took the rejection seriously, accepted it as final, moved forward without them. And moving forward without them is devastating to them because it's teaching them that rejection is mutual now. They rejected you, your silence is rejecting them back. And being rejected by someone they rejected is role reversal they didn't anticipate and can't handle. Your silence is more devastating because it's creating uncertainty they can't resolve. When you were responsive, even when hurt or angry, they had information. They knew how you felt, knew where you stood, knew what you were thinking. But silence gives them no information. They don't know if you're hurt or unbothered, don't know if you miss them or have forgotten them, don't know if you're suffering or thriving, don't know if the door is open or permanently closed. The uncertainty is torture, is them not being able to settle into any narrative about what happened because they have no data about your state. The no data is creating obsessive thinking, obsessive wondering, obsessive need to know that can't be satisfied because you're silent. An obsessive unsatisfied need is destroying them slowly through their own thoughts, spiraling without resolution. The specific ways your silence is humbling them, the silence is forcing them to see they weren't as important as they thought they were. While you were responsive, while you were pursuing, while you were trying, they could tell themselves they were central to your life, that you needed them, that you were oriented around them, that they mattered enormously. But silence is showing them they're not central, not needed, not orienting your life, not mattering the way they thought they mattered. The revelation that they're not as important as their ego needed them to be is humbling, is destroying their self-concept, is teaching them that they overestimated their impact, their importance, their place in your life. And learning you overestimated yourself is humiliation, is ego injury, is them being forced to see themselves as less significant than they believed. Your silence is also humbling them by revealing they took you for granted. took your pursuit for granted, took your patience for granted, took your willingness to stay despite their patterns for granted, assumed you'd always be there, always be available, always give them another chance. But silence is proving they were wrong. You're not there, not available, not giving another chance. The proving wrong is them facing they made assumptions that turned out to be false, made calculations that turned out to be miscalculations, made predictions that turned out to be wrong. Being wrong is humbling, is them facing their arrogance, their entitlement, their belief that they could reject you and you'd remain available, that they could push you away and you'd stay close, that they could end it and you'd keep the door open. The assumptions being destroyed through your silence is humiliation through being revealed as wrong. The silence is humbling them by showing them they're not in control. They thought rejecting you gave them control. Control over the terms, control over the ending, control over whether reconciliation happens. But silence took the control, took their power to determine what happens next, took their ability to manage the dynamic. They can't reconcile if you're silent, can't restore contact if you're unavailable, can't control the narrative if you're not participating in creating narrative. The loss of control is humbling, is them being powerless, is them experiencing what you experienced when they were controlling the relationship through their withdrawal. And experiencing powerlessness when you thought you had power is humiliation, is lesson in what power actually is. And power is yours through silence. Theirs is gone through your absence, making their rejection irrelevant. What they're doing in response to the silence and why it's all failing. They're trying to break the silence indirectly, posting things designed for you to see, using mutual friends to get information, creating situations where you might have to respond. The indirect attempts are them trying to make you engage without having to directly reach out, trying to restore contact without being vulnerable enough to pursue directly. But indirect attempts are failing. You're not engaging with posts, not responding to information through friends, not taking bait of manufactured situations. The failing is teaching them that indirect doesn't work with you, that you're not playing games, that you're actually silent, not strategically silent, that the silence is real boundary they can't manipulate around. Some are trying direct contact but doing it in defended ways, casual text that pretends nothing happened, question about something mundane, breadcrumb of attention that's designed to test whether you're still available. The defended direct is them trying to restore contact without acknowledging what happened, without taking responsibility, without being real about the rejection and their regret about the rejection. But defended direct is failing. You're not responding to casual, not answering mundane, not taking breadcrumb bait. The not responding is teaching them that defended doesn't work, that if they want contact, they need to be real, need to be vulnerable, need to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for it. And most can't do that, can't be vulnerable enough. So defended attempts fail and silence continues. Others are trying to make you jealous, making sure you know through various channels that they're fine, that they're seeing other people.
Swer Semi. Yeah. Yeah. Swer Semi. Yeah. Also. Každý chce být já, žít jak se žít má. Osnova přísná, takhle pak je příkrá. Co bylo mít trát, ne o to se mít smát. Nebudu se víc bát, sám na svých stát. Kdo je ochotný dát svým dárem získá. Svoboda se smí zdát každému, kdo chtít zná. Vím, že nehrozí pád, nebudu se mýkat. S láskou okolí znát, přimět se víc ptát. Má osoba stříd má osvětlením v tmách. Život to zpráva být na nezačleněných hrách. Nejsem co kdo říká, já se lidem míchá. Mechanika skřípá, když člověk nedýchá. Jednota mě vnímá, holota nevlídná. Mně se to netýká, sebe se nezříkám. Prý problém prý já, nikdo se nehlídá. Prý časem plýtvám, vůbec ho nevnímám. Čím jsem se nevídá, původ se mě zříká. No ty písně dít hrát, Swer Semi se dívá. Vesmír se vítá, pod vlivem nezývám. Prostor mě nestíhá, žiju nepřežívám. Noc a den se střídá, dualitu přijímám. Má cesta je přímá, přímosti si všímám. Jen co se čeho týká, s jiným se nestýkám. Má osoba nemístná, miluji být sám. Nejsem, kdo si odříká, se s konem počítám. Smrt mi to pohlídá, stavím si boží chrám. Skrze tělo promítám, vím, co si počínám. Děj si pročítám, úpravy posílám. Srdci se potýkám, skutečnost obývám. Dimenze prolínám, skutečnosti sbírám. Vím, nepředvídám, pravdou se přezdívám. Jsem nepředstírám, jsem neměnný pán. Jsem přesný plán, vesměr se vžívám. Nepravdu předínám, dlež se nemíchám. Verš přepínám, papír přemítám. Chci pevný rám, sorry vymítám. Sám se předsílám, temnotu nesmívám. Učení si přečítám, temně se usmívám. Útěchy neskýtám, své nitro vyzvídám. Pochvaly nezbírám, nekřič nepřispíchám. Nálady nestřídám, Swer Semi překřtívám. Sám sebou se sbírám, ze světa vyčnívám. Frekvenci vysílám, o tuto přebírám. Esenčně přispívám, pod světa přebírám. Přetřívám. Ach jo, zhlastíš. Proces degradace, vůbec není senzace. Duševní dehydratace, pozvolná terminace. Pryč od civilizace, soukromí separace. Samota je ta šťáce, opak asimilace. Prioritě reklamace, domácí trefanace. Parná artikulace, akce nezdařila se. Sebemanipulace, nelegální stimulace. Nepřehledná situace, restart simulace. Klesá krevní saturace, temnoty flotulace. Čeká tě fakturace, tepová kulminace. Zastavit je na čase, když dlouho není blaze. Dočasná hibernace, po každodenní snaze. Radši hospitalizace než lobotomizace. Či inicializace, čas diagnostikace. Nezbytná organizace, cílená performace. Detekce, deformace, oprava, kultivace. Dobrovolná segregace, či výterče legrace. Kombinuješ segmentace, zapisuješ observace. Vnitřní deratizace, dematerializace. Žádná polemizace, řád ritualizace. To je nic. Stem 54. 51. Let me need beat. Need beat. Proces degradace, vůbec není senzace. Duševní dehydratace, pozvolná terminace. Pryč od civilizace, soukromí separace. Samota je to šťáce, opak asimilace. Projde ti reklamace, domácí trepanace. Varná artikulace, akce nezdařila se. Sebemanipulace, nelegální stimulace. Nepřehledná situace, restart simulace. Klesá krevní saturace, temnoty flotulace. Čeká tě fakturace, tepová kulminace. Zastavit je na čase, když dlouho není blaze. Dočasná hibernace, po každodenní snaze. Radši hospitalizace než lobotomizace. Či inicializace, čas diagnostikace. Nezbytná organizace, cílená performace. Detekce, deformace, oprava, kultivace. Dobrovolná segregace, či výtřečem legrace. Kombinuješ segmentace, zapisuješ observace. Vnitřní deratizace, dematerializace. Žádná polemizace, řád ritualizace. Duševní specifikace, diplomy, certifikace. Vlastní modifikace, schází identifikace. Pouliční ordinace, změna moderace. Nitrožilní aplikace, zvyšuje potřeba se. Osobnostní mutace, recharakterizace. To není konturace, obrat polarizace. Ještě větší komplikace, cesta po horší trase. Vstoupila intoxikace, na tvrdé drogy fixace. Zastava defibrilace, ze světa deportace. Pozitivní afirmace, nepomůžou ti si práce. Chtěl si, aby bylo dráze, teď na světě přišlo dráze. Nepoznáváš se po dráze, balancuješ na provaze. Jak se ti líbí inovace, neskoušej litovace. Výborná improvizace, čas rekapitulace. Ne, není to simulace, to jsou malísa intonace. Měl si to v povaze, pravidel ignorace. Jiný beat, ale se mi nelíbí. Tak počkej chvíli, jo. Jiný beat. Jiný beat. z monstra, dopis pro potra. Mě zaposla, moje slovo motla. Vedeta bodla, osadě protla. Zapomeň na broska, maska hopla. Hleďme na osla, síť krásná droska. Tu je teď hrozba, utři si sopla. Chtěl si to rozdat, karma tě kopla. Se sploštila složka, tvůj dokument vložka. Oboce troška, pohádka troška. Ti ubyla nožka, už nejsi stonožka. Ukryt do rožka, už nejsi položka. Máme listu počňat, už si rozklad. Přístup ti odňat, jmenu si poklad. Slovy do tma, do pekošťa. Ze stovky do dna, co ty potrat. Bylo to poznat, netřeba se dostat. Stokrát obsat, nestačí-li dostat. Zasloužíš odznak, takhle všechny poštvat. Hotový rozvrat, řekni mi proč pak. Škrt bomb, oblak, nějak věci počkat. Přestupnou protlak, za čas co si ukrad. Do srdečních komnat čepelí košta. Tady máš oplat, loučím se do štva. Hláš mě chce dostat, já se chci dospat. Chrápou po splatnosti, chtěj odklad. Ne a ne se probrat, klon oha hrozba. Hled, co by odhad plán, k tomu fotka. Se mám posrat, klebety hovna. Zkuste mě obsat, mě sama smrt krotka. I don't give a fuck, brat, co je ostnat. Čas podle rozpad, plyn zkrát, oheň hopla. Popel validace, na oporu moci, kotel marinace, pro kontrolu moci, světa empatizace, boží inkarnace, směr empirizace, kočí orkestrace, proces delikace, Bůh versus moci, úcty derivace, za oponou noci, do evakuace, genus lodí terminace, dopad je gradulace, po uliční deprivace, no a co začnu zase sedna znovu zajci na se, Swer Semi okupace, kde cestu míru našel, Slovenc verze kašel, vypouštím, co jsem našel, po cestě trochu zašel, sám ve své péči masel, to korunovace, králna otázka, kdo si onomu ovatce, kdož ponechá zlosy, až nenechá dobroty, si nechá všechny noty, demodlí ochoty, do každé boží roty, co ztratili boty. Pro piče jen klokoty, jak cílí jen kroky, být neděle soboty, to bych mohl nahrát jenom tak, ne? Ty to zvědět, být neděle.
I can stop my heart when the lights go out. Got me right now. I can fight the dark when the lights go out. Got me right now.
Swer Semi. Popel validace, na oporu moci, kotel marinace, pro kontrolu moci, světa empatizace, boží inkarnace, směr empirizace, kočí orkestrace, proces delikace, Bůh versus moci, úcty derivace, za oponou noci, do evakuace, genus lodí terminace, dopad je graduace, po uliční deprivace, no a co začnu zase sedna znovu svěci na ser, Swer Semi okupace, vždy cestu míru našel, Slovenc verze kašel, vypouštím, co jsem našel, po cestě trochu zašel, sám ve své péči mazel, do korunovace, králna otázka, kdo si onomu ovace, kdož ponechá zlosy, ač nenechá dobroty, si nechá všechny noty, démon tý neochoty, do každé boží roty, pro píče jen kokoty, a k cíli jenom kroky, byť neděle soboty, v zádech vidím ty hochy, co ztratili boty, si nadělali boty, přehraní mojí sloky, ty pustí proti boky, jak háda si jedu kopy, nemůžeš mě koplit, co vidíš jako roky, tahám víte za copy, drum strana hmoty, v zádech díky broky, nechci díky stopy, chci penízky drogy, jsou prybítě bloby, tam devítky gloky, sestřelíme hroty, bez servítky kropy, houlením jsem opět, pro znění neprofit, tím zněním jsem ošit, vyfelíte v topy, mě zkoušíte krotit, slípka slípce kvoky, ti zkoušíte plotit, co prosím, co oci, vidím jen hlavy klopit, správně nezlobit, vyžídali jsme to si, slova mouče bolit, stop bez autorizace, hrozba more kronit, start autonomizace, zkus cit zlonit, jsem autorem AC, bolesti práce, jsem iluminace, práce, děťátko pašan, jsem odložen zase, založím se pase, jsem slovem hlase, procesem degradace, vůbec není senzace, kopala vstekala se, pozměna stěn v hlase, minulost nedala se. Swer Semi. Pěkný texty, ale jsem poslední, co jsem napsal teď. Ne? Popel validace na oporu moci, koukal marinace, pro kontrolu moci, světa empatizace, boží inkarnace, směr empirizace, kočí okem trase, proces delikace, Bůh versus tvoci, úcty derivace, za oponou noci, no evakuace, kedu zlodí terminace, dopad je graduace, pouliční deprivace, no a co začnu zase zem na svět, slunosu. Jiný beat. Nepocajeme, já to jenom otočím. Já si k tomu stoupnu takhle, aby to nebylo vidět, že jdeš. To pojď. Tenhle ne. Tam jiný beat. Já už vím, ten tam půja, tady mám někde půja, mi přišel zrovna. Kde ten půja? Zmizel? Už to není, jsem tady viděl. Tohle není dobré, to se mi nelíbí. Nebo jako je dobré, ale už jsem slyšel mnohokrát. Ne, to není Free for Profit. Swer Semi. Validace. To je